So by way of starting, we would like to invite you to do something. We invite you to take the clay.
We invite you to hold it.
Allow it to warm in your hands.
We invite you to feel it, to be aware of feeling it.
Push it, press it, contain it.
Be aware of your hands, be aware of your body.
And we invite you to fiddle.
We invite you to play.
Make.
Think about the material.
Its materialness.
Pay attention to the connection between the material and the body.
Pay attention to the connection between the material and the space.
Be aware.
We invite you to continue.
Pay attention to the connection between the material and the space.
Be aware.
The materialness.
Think about the material.
Make.
We invite you to play.
We invite you to fiddle.
Be aware of your hands. Be aware of your body.
Push it, press it, contain it.
We invite you to feel it and be aware of feeling it.
Allow it to warm in your hands.
We invite you to hold it. We invite you to repeat and to repeat. So we wanted to invite material into the room as our starting point, and hopefully we've set a bit of an atmosphere in which to continue. Our desire today is to share something of what we do, both how we share it, along with the information that we share. So for slightly more formal introductions, my name is Alice Walton. I'm a co-convener for schools and teachers at TATE Modern and TATE Britain.
And I'm Emma McGarry, curator of the Schools and Teachers programme.
So the Schools and Teachers team is one of a number of teams, mostly audience-focused, that sit within the learning department at TATE. It's a huge department. And our particular remit is 5 to 18. So we work with young people between 5 and 18 and teachers of all sorts. So they might be secondary, primary, teachers working within special educational needs or children with challenging behaviours. We work with trainee teachers and non-specialist teachers.
This is a quote by Gabriella Roscoe, which could be said to underpin the ethos of our programme. It's a constant and something that we hold with us as we programme. The quote is, "What is important is not so much what people see in the gallery, but what people see after looking at these things and how they confront reality again." The quote relates very directly to one of our key aims, which is for young people and teachers to learn about themselves and others through being with art. We've stolen a few slides for this part from another presentation, just to give you an overview of our programme and approach. This principal aim of young people and teachers learning about themselves and others through being with art really points to the idea of art doing something, having a purpose, a social function, and we understand this to be an ontological proposition. We believe that art can support people to think about and work out a sense of themselves in relation to the things and people around them in the world. The way we approach our aim of supporting young people's encounter with art is through working with artists. Our invitation to artists is to draw pedagogical strategies through their practice to create various learning contexts, whether that's workshops, professional development, events, gallery resources. And we understand practice in the broadest sense to encompass, along with any particular work an artist might make, their ways of thinking, looking, and learning as an artist.
And all our programme shares 3 common characteristics. So all will involve audience, so that might be the young person, the teacher, or a combination thereof. The artwork, so for us that's the exhibitions, the permanent displays, and the context of the building itself, and the artists that we invite in. And we are interested in something really quite particular being made possible by bringing those 3 constituent parts into a dialogue together. It's an exchange, it's a conversation, not a transfer of information or knowledge. And the term conversation here really needs to be understood in a very broad sense. So it could be verbal, it could be spoken conversation, but equally it could be understood through the body and embodied knowledge, through materials, through experience, and experience particularly of being together in company and with art. So as a team, we are committed to educational equity and inclusion and actively support TATE's mission to become a more inclusive global museum. And leading this is our desire that all young people see themselves reflected in all that they encounter at TATE. So that's the artwork, the staff, and the general audience. Another quote from American writer and intellectual James Baldwin, so I'll just read it. "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." So we recognise that there is a gap between where we desire to be and where we currently are. We know that children and young people who are disabled or have learning difficulties do not currently have equal access to many of London's cultural venues and resources. And this does include TATE, of course. However, wherever possible, we are taking positive action to change this. And this is important because we strongly believe that a role for public galleries and institutions in art education is to provide access to all young people as part of their schooling and alongside their teachers. And this is to ensure the widest possible range of people contribute, not only as consumers of art, but as producers.
We believe that all programmes should be accessible to all. A year ago, we decided to take what we're calling a long look at the accessibility of our programme as a whole, feeling that we weren't doing enough, we're still not. We wanted to shift our practice in relation to thinking much more consistently and embeddedly through inclusion and difference. In this talk, we will use the term young people with additional needs. By this, we primarily mean disabled young people and those with learning disabilities, but we also mean any young person who faces a barrier or barriers to accessing art alongside their peers, be that a physical barrier, emotional, social, economic. By using this term, we are deliberately and necessarily complicating this relationship and wanting to recognise the multiple barriers to inclusion that young people face. And we will expand on this through the example projects that we will share as we run through now some of our key reflections from this long look in relation to our recent learning. Starting with...
Pay attention to the gaps. The first piece of key learning we'd like to communicate is our coming to know just how little we knew. Within the team, we share a lot of experience of working with audiences with additional needs. So we could have, and perhaps did, assume a certain amount of knowledge and assume with that a kind of expertise. But it was a really important moment as the shared recognition that we aren't the experts. We don't have all of the answers. We have gaps in our knowledge, and these really present through the programme that we offer. And the key gap that stood out to us above all others was that while we offer and always have offered a programme for young people with additional needs, we're not nearly as good as we should be at working with young people with additional needs and also with artists with additional needs. And this is slowly changing, and in changing, through all of the detail, through the programme, the planning, the delivery, the logistics, everything else is having to shift. So it is forcing a shift.
Partner with people who know more than you. As previously mentioned, within the team we have a lot of interest and experience, but we also recognise that best practice in the field is shifting all the time. And we recognise that we needed to take steps to actively seek out partnerships with expert organisations to support us to think through our programme. Importantly, our approach here is about building sustainable, long-term relationships and change, and to support learning over time and through practice. Therefore, there are a number of key partnerships that we will return to throughout this presentation. A core partnership began in 2014 when we worked with Tourette's Hero, who are an organisation that run really innovative events for children and young people with Tourette's that really focus on the value of play, interaction and social inclusion rather than any associated problems. With Tourette's Hero, we collaboratively devised a large-scale project that these images come from called We Forgot the Lot, which involved 300 young people, their friends and families, and we worked with 11 artists to put that on. The title, We Forgot the Lot, really sought to underscore the idea that TATE might learn from working with others about how people want to be in the gallery, and that as a result of that learning, the institution should learn to bend to the desires of the people who are coming to visit.
The value lived experience, We Forgot the Lot, was a really critical moment in our learning, particularly around learning to value lived experience and to understand that we are not the expert, as we were saying before, but need to make space for the lived expertise of others. It also introduced us to the social model of disability, which you'll probably know is a way of viewing the world developed by disabled people. And the model sets out that we're not disabled by our disabilities or our impairments, but rather the barriers that we encounter in society. So We Forgot the Lot was one of the key projects that have put practice in place that we still use to this day. This slide is from a project called Digging the Gallery. It could be said to epitomise much of our learning. It's a 3-year project that took Minecraft as a conceptual frame. This idea was Ethan's, who was at the time a Day Trippers Young Ambassador. Day Trippers is a very small organisation who provides access to cultural and leisure activities for people with additional needs. I thought Minecraft was Mindcraft until Ethan informed me otherwise. So he was absolutely integral in designing a project that ran over the course of 3 years. He also developed with one of the artists we worked with an alternative map for the gallery. So for the project's duration, a different map was picked up with Ethan's thoughts and worries and questions around works, like, for example, Tracy Emin's bed, which was very amusing. So Digging the Gallery as a project really recognised young people as the experts in their own lives, and experts, again, that we needed to learn with. And several other small organisations were involved in that project. Kanduku, which is a dance company working with disabled and non-disabled dancers, and Heart and Soul, who will come up again, who are a creative arts company with learning disability culture at their heart.
Think about language. More recently, we've run a project with young people excluded from mainstream education, and often, as a result, more from society more generally. We wanted to explore how being with an artist might afford alternative possibilities for these young people who have a really acute sense of their perceived failure in a system, in this case the education system, that similarly could be said to have failed them. The project was called Identity by the young people taking part. And this was, again, because of their acute awareness of how they are perceived, often negatively, and because of their desire to have more control over determining their identity. As a group who do not see TATE as a place for them, and it could definitely be said that historically maybe it hasn't been, we wanted to learn from them about how TATE needed to change its attitudes, its behaviours, to make them feel included and empowered to access TATE as a site for their own learning and enjoyment. At the heart of Identity were conversations around exclusion, and working towards the project, we became interested in the proposition or provocation that we can't talk about inclusion without talking about exclusion. So rather than thinking about how we might include, we spent some time thinking about how TATE might exclude, might be excluding. And this led to lots of very interesting, sometimes difficult conversations, in particular around who we are as a team and who we are not, and as an institution. Our team, we're an all-female, able-bodied and majority white team. So we really had to question and wanted to question what our experience is and what it isn't, and again, how that presents in our programme and what we can do about it. This is our annual teachers magazine that we produce called Playground, and for the next edition we are taking the word exclusion and wanting to really think about this further, trying to always consider things from alternative perspectives and to try and think not as the institution. In particular, we are interested in exploding the terminology around inclusion, exclusion, and ability, disability. In particular, the term special educational needs and disabilities, or SEND, as it's often referred to in the UK. In the UK, special educational needs and disabilities is an umbrella term that's used in education policy and has been since about the 1970s when it was introduced. However, many organisations, including Heart and Soul, that we work very closely with, are really moving or have already moved away from using the term, feeling that rather that it's a term that is imposed on rather than coming from the people that it refers to. And there's a movement between a shift from the use of the term special needs towards special rights, which might have more resonance in Italy perhaps than in the UK, but feels like a really important semantic shift with a lot of power behind it. And we're really interested in following that conversation and the kind of broader impact of that across the disability movement. Mainly it's about an argument of the language of the education policy needing to catch up with the language of, in this case, the Equality Act, and really focusing that this matters because language really matters when you're talking.
Look with, learn with. So Identity, the project Emma's just been talking about, really foregrounded this idea of looking with young people and learning with young people rather than about them. And we wanted the research that we were conducting around the project to take a similar ethos. So we worked with an academic called Dave McGarry, who supported the young people to be the researchers. So they drew up their own research questions, and then they conducted research, and they researched with their teachers, so really sort of spinning the power dynamic with their staff cohort. They did interviews with us, the curators, and also with people across the institution, including security. So they were really interested in asking questions about how they were perceived by the security teams at TATE when they were in the gallery spaces. So we'd like to share with you an excerpt from a conversation. This is Ashley, who's a young person from Southwark Inclusive Learning Service, which is the school we worked with for Identity. She's taking Monica, who's one of the Schools and Teachers team members, on a tour of the gallery. And in this section, she's describing this artwork. And we really wanted to draw another voice, a young person's voice, into this conversation. Oops.
And Monica, in this instance, was blindfolded.
Crucial piece of information, yes.
It's little kids playing, like they're not rich or anything, but they're little kids playing.
Are you recording?
Yeah.
Cool.
They're playing and there's like lots of pollution because this was like in the older times. And there's rich men and I think there's a soldier fighting or trying to kill like the poor people.
Okay.
Because no, he's a judge, that's what he is. And then there's like an electric chair on top.
An electric chair,
Yeah.
like the one for sentencing, for killing people.
Yeah. And then it's showing also how it's lots of homeless people, stray dogs, no, there's like fancy dogs, showing death because there's like coffins, there's a little black baby that's like polishing shoes for someone much higher than him. There's a woman carrying her baby. So I think this picture is based on like where lots of discrimination and olden times where there was like lots of pollution.
So does it look like from the past, or do you think it could also be from the present?
From the past and a bit of the present because there's still like people trying to get rid of the homeless because they think they take up space.
That sounds very present.
Somewhere there's also like lots of racism in some places.
Yeah.
And obviously there's mourning for like lost family members and children like refugees suffering and they have to use like a bucket of water to clean themselves. So some of this is like really quite modern.
That was slightly hard to hear, but hopefully you got a sense of the sort of real deep looking that young person was able to do as a first-time visitor to any art gallery, and really drawing out some of the quite complicated issues that present through that piece.
Programme with, not for. Looking with and learning with young people with additional needs and the organisations that support them supports the development of programme with as opposed to programme for those individuals. And a key piece of learning for us relating to this is that, as we mentioned earlier, is that the practice necessarily has to shift through this process, and that in giving up space you have to relinquish some control. An example of this might be a project that we do, an event series called Testing, 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 which is a pan-disability event for everyone that happens at Tate Modern. Testing, Testing, Testing welcomes 3 organisations, 3 smaller kind of expert organisations to share their approach alongside one another as a way of promoting and exploring genuinely inclusive practice. This new reality that we means that we kind of put a frame in place in which activity is realised, but we don't know exactly what will be programmed or how the elements will relate. Perhaps the antithesis of more curated programme that we're used to. And the emphasis here, shared with the general public, is really about a space to explore and a visibility to explore, to try out and test things. And in this, the relationship with our partners, one of which, again, is Heart and Soul, becomes really vital, and that kind of trust and generosity within that becomes really foregrounded. And a really lovely result of that is that we are endlessly surprised and challenged, and of course continually learning every time we do them.
I take an intersectional approach. So access is an intersectional issue, so we really seek to understand the multiple barriers or oppressions that people might experience in accessing the programme. This necessarily moves us away from programme for people with additional needs towards programme that is for all people. In 2017, we developed a set of commitments as a practical tool for all of the people in the team to use, and also as a way of declaring a shared commitment towards a more inclusive programme and more inclusive institution. We're very quickly going to read them just to hold them in the space. We will act now.
We will employ more Black, Asian, minority ethnic artists, non-binary, queer and trans artists and disabled artists.
We will resource artists to give them agency.
We will listen.
We will hear.
And learn from what we hear.
We will be prepared to unlearn privileged behaviours.
We will make change on a daily basis.
Our teaching resources will reflect all the people we work with.
Our publicity will reflect all the people we reach out to.
We will actively resist reproducing the exclusions of the canon.
And will support the voices of those least represented.
We will change practice.
We will make mistakes.
We will ask opinions.
We will change and open up our recruitment practices.
We will question who validates and where value lies. We will be empathetic.
Moves on to our next key reflection, which is to be visible. Principally, this refers to really quite political imperative of questioning who gets to be in TATE, who gets to take up space, who gets to be heard, and whose voice gets to be valued. And really thinking if we are genuinely interested in supporting diverse audiences and genuinely committed to inclusion, we, TATE, will have to make significant changes, and not just by way of accommodating difference, but by learning to be different as an institution. Visibility can play a really key part in this for us as learning curators, for the institution as a whole, and also for the broader public audience who engage with our programme. So We Forgot the Lot was visibly different. It was also really noisy and wild. Digging was visibly different. It made really strong and clear and brilliant demands of TATE Britain in particular to relax and to, in this case, become a party in a sense. Identity, which was visibly different and really gave agency and voice to young people whose behaviour is not perhaps seen to always conform to ideas of how you should be in a gallery. And testing is, again, is visibly different. It's loud, it's joyous, it's chaotic, it's uncontained, and it's always unknown, which is brilliant.
Do it anyway. So perhaps this is a good piece of learning to finish on, and maybe an invitation to do it anyway. We continue to need to be brave, to step out of our comfort zone sometimes. Things go wrong, we make mistakes. Do it anyway as a commitment to continuing to learn, which keeps things live and exciting, but certainly is not without its challenges. And this links to our entire thesis, which is that learning how best to support a specific audience, whether that is people with additional needs or young people with so-called disruptive or challenging behaviours, means that we are learning how to better support all our audiences, which links to something that was said earlier this morning, and also, obviously, supporting ourselves. So our final word goes to the teachers from this year's summer school, an annual week-long course for teachers who spent the week in 2018 exploring how practices that are seen to be interesting and valuable and good to carry out with young people with additional needs might actually teach all of us something, might be good for all students and everyone visiting the gallery. Thank you.